Imagine you are sitting on a crowded subway train or standing in the terminal of a busy airport during the peak of the holiday rush. You are surrounded by hundreds of people, but you feel this strange, hollow ache in your chest. You are probably thinking about the rent that is due on Monday, or that credit card balance you have been avoiding looking at, or maybe just the general weight of trying to build a career in a world that feels increasingly unstable. You feel stuck, like you are running a race where the finish line keeps moving and everyone around you has better shoes. My name is Frankie, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to glide through these massive life challenges while others are constantly stressed about their bank account balance and their place in the world. It is something I have obsessed over because I have realized that how we view our bank accounts is often just a reflection of how we view our connection to other people. We are all essentially trying to find a way to belong without losing ourselves in the process. What if I told you that the key to healing that specific modern brand of loneliness and even fixing some of those deep-seated anxieties about security and status is not found in a new budgeting app or a networking event, but in the simple, quiet act of observing the strangers moving past you in transit? It sounds almost too simple, right? But there is a profound psychological shift that happens when we stop being the protagonist of our own crisis and start becoming a witness to the shared human experience. You know, there is this entire generation of people that just exists in the middle of our cultural conversation, barely mentioned and almost invisible. They are the ones born roughly between 1965 and 1980, Generation X. They are often your older co-workers who never complain or your parents who seem oddly detached sometimes. But their psychology is probably the most misunderstood because they were the first generation of latchkey kids on a massive scale. Think about that for a second. Imagine being 8 years old in 1978 and coming home to an empty house because both of your parents are working. There were no smartphones, no Ring cameras, and no way for anyone to check if you were okay. You just let yourself in, made a snack, and did your homework alone. By 1984, there were approximately 7 million children between the ages of 5 and 13 who were regularly unsupervised after school. That experience did more than just make them self-reliant. It drilled in the idea that you cannot always count on someone being there, and that actions have real consequences that you cannot talk your way out of. When I see people in transit today, I see that same latchkey energy, everyone in their own little bubble, fending for themselves. But for Gen X, this created a high contingency environment where they learn to predict consequences in real time. They think 3 steps ahead in ways that baffle younger generations because their brains were trained to survive that empty house. When you observe strangers, you're actually tapping into that same mechanical intuition. You are looking under the hood of humanity. It is honestly fascinating how we have become so tribal. You see it most clearly with something like the Super Bowl. While 115 million people are screaming at their TVs, there is this entire shadow population who genuinely could not care less. I'm not talking about people being contrarian, I mean people who see the hype as if it were competitive butter sculpting. They have complete emotional neutrality. What is happening when people get obsessed with sports is this tangled mess of tribal identity, a concept called basking in reflected glory. Your brain gives you a dopamine hit when your team wins, even though you did literally nothing but sit on your couch. But for the observers, the ones who don't care, that trigger just doesn't land the same way. This usually comes down to what psychologists call the locus of control. Do you focus your energy on things you can influence, or are you comfortable investing emotionally in things outside your control? Some people find it fundamentally unsatisfying to scream at a screen because it doesn't change the outcome. When you are in transit, observing strangers, you are exercising an internal locus of control. You aren't asking for reflected glory from the crowd. You are finding value in your own perspective. I have noticed that the people who are the best at this kind of observation are often the ones who have been through some real stuff. Their brains operate on a different frequency because they have been trained by necessity to become survival masterpieces. They develop an immunity to life's chaos. You would think they would be cynical, but often they are the most aggressively empathetic people you will ever meet. They can spot pain in others from a mile away because they have memorized that language fluently. When they walk into a room, they don't just see furniture, they see the emotional temperature. They sense whether the silence is heavy, irritated, or simply tired. This is part of what researchers call post-traumatic growth. About half to 2/3 of people who go through significant trauma don't just bounce back, they bounce forward. Their relationships deepen, and their appreciation for ordinary moments becomes almost comically intense. They will literally tear up at a good sunset. When you observe strangers in transit, you are practicing that same high-level empathy. You are reading the texture of the room. You are noticing the lighthouses among the crowd, those people who shine not because they are perfect, but because they remember the darkness. This hypervigilance, though, it often comes from a childhood that ended way before it was supposed to. Maybe you were the kid making dinner for your siblings at 9 years old. while your parents work double shifts. Psychologists call this parentification. It isn't true maturity, it is a survival adaptation. Your nervous system learned to operate in crisis mode as the default setting. You became very good at reading people's emotions and sensing moods the second someone walked through the door. The price tag for that superpower is that, as an adult, you struggle with the simplest things, like asking for help or resting without feeling guilty. You built an entire operating system around the idea that stability depends on your ability to hold everything together. You might even feel alone in a room full of friends, because nobody sees how hard you are working to keep everyone okay. But here is the thing, when you are a stranger among strangers in a train station, that operating system can finally take a break. You aren't responsible for anyone there. You can just be a human being instead of a human doing. You are allowed to be a beginner at being taken care of, even if that just means letting the rhythm of the train carry you. There is also this weird bilingual experience that people born between 1976 and 1985 have. They are called Zennials, a micro-generation caught between the analog and digital worlds. They remember rotary phones and physical notes in class, but they also saw the world go digital right as they hit adulthood. Their prefrontal cortex was still maturing when the technological landscape overhauled itself, making them uniquely adaptable. They can have a face-to-face conversation without checking their phone every 30 seconds, but they aren't intimidated by new software. If you are a Zennial, or even if you just adopt that mindset, you have a different relationship with privacy. You remember when your embarrassing moments just faded into memory instead of living forever on social media. Our brains are actually designed to edit memories, to let the rest fade. When everything is documented, that natural process gets complicated. Observing strangers allows you to return to that analog state. You are witnessing moments that won't be documented, conversations that don't get screenshotted, and joy that doesn't need witnesses. It restores your psychological ownership, the deep feeling that your experiences belong entirely to you. I think that is why some people refuse to post on social media at all. They aren't just shy, they are skeptical of what being seen has become. Social media promised connection, but it delivered performance anxiety. Every post is a script, every photo is a stage. When you share something personal, you are often trading ownership for validation. But the people who resist posting have a strong internal locus of control. They don't need strangers to confirm their happiness, they just need to feel it. When you step away from the digital noise and just watch people in the real world, you start to notice who actually reaches out without an algorithm prompting them. You realize that privacy isn't loneliness, and silence isn't emptiness. Being unseen doesn't mean being insignificant. Sometimes the truest way to exist is quietly and fully, without needing the world to witness every moment. There is a darker side to this too. Some people disappear not because they hate everyone, but because staying became heavier than leaving. They reply slower, they cancel plans, and then one day they are just gone. It feels cruel from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like survival. This usually happens because of emotional saturation. They have given too much for too long without feeling seen or reciprocated. They were the strong one, the fixer, the emotional container for everyone else. Eventually, they stop explaining themselves because they have said it too many times already. If you have ever felt that urge to just walk away from everything, you know that silence can be a form of self-definition. But silence also removes the mirrors of who you are. When you step away from everyone, you lose the reflections of yourself. This is where observing strangers becomes so healing. In transit, you are in a breathing room. Your nervous system slows down because the anticipation of being needed or drained begins to fade. You can connect with people without the fear that the cycle of overextending yourself will restart. You are learning discernment. That healthy connection is about selectivity, not accessibility. Honestly, I think we are all just carrying around capabilities that are becoming extinct. We grew up in a world that wasn't a black box. We knew how to flip a bike upside down and fix the chain ourselves. We had mechanical intuition. We knew that actions had immediate, tangible consequences, the wooden spoon philosophy of life. We understood that some moments only come once, like Saturday morning cartoons that you couldn't stream later. We were trained for the deep dive because we had to hunt through library card catalogs for information. Information had a physical cost, so we valued it more. We formed our souls in private, away from constant noise. When we observe strangers now, we are looking for that same grit and quiet strength in others. We are looking for people who are actually living, rather than just performing for an audience. It is easy to get caught up in the identity fatigue of modern life. We get placed into roles so early, the responsible one, the mature one, that we stop feeling like a person and start feeling like a function. We hold ourselves to impossible emotional standards and disappear when we can't meet them. But the truth is that connection doesn't have to hurt. It just requires skills we were never taught, like communicating boundaries early or allowing others to disappoint us without internalizing it. Most importantly, it requires letting yourself be imperfect. Real connection happens in partial presence, in showing up tired and saying, "I don't have much today." It is about being human instead of being reliable. So the next time you are feeling that crushing weight of financial stress or that gnawing sense of isolation, I want you to try something. Put your phone in your pocket. Look around at the people sharing that space with you. Notice the person who is laughing a little too loudly at their own joke. They might be using humor as a shield against their own pain. Notice the person sitting alone, perfectly content. They might have mastered the art of being unreachable. Notice the latchkey independence in the way someone navigates the crowd. When you do this, you aren't just people watching, you are rediscovering your own thoughts beneath the noise. You are realizing that you don't have to overgive or vanish to feel safe. You can stay. You are finding a way to belong without self-sacrifice. Ultimately, observing strangers in transit heals our loneliness because it reminds us that we are all navigating our own paths with the same internal compass. We are all lighthouses in our own way, shining because we remember the darkness. It teaches us that while the world might be addicted to the skim, we are still capable of the deep dive. It reminds us that our worth isn't measured by what we produce or how well we manage other people's emotions, but by our ability to simply be. You're allowed to be messy, you're allowed to be needy, and you're allowed to be irresponsible sometimes. You have been holding on so tight for so long. It is okay to finally let go. It is safe to let someone else take a turn. It is safe to be young at heart, even if you are late to it. The journey of understanding our own psychology, why we hoard money, why we fear connection, why we hide, is a long one. But it starts with that one safe observation, that one moment of choosing connection over withdrawal. It isn't about opening every door to every person. It is about learning how to keep some doors open without standing in the doorway bleeding. It is about finding that balance where you can be both independent and collaborative, skeptical yet optimistic. You are a bridge generation, and while bridges don't always get the most attention, they are the ones holding everything together. That quiet strength is your superpower, and honestly, it is okay if nobody notices. That is the most authentic way to live. Just keep moving, keep observing, and keep finding reasons to hope. You have earned that wisdom, and that is not just psychology, it is poetry in motion.